welcome Michelle back up as our physical activity specialist. She's going to talk to us a little bit, and then I think get us up to the interview maybe.
I'll do a little bit of both. And it was interesting when I was listening to you speak, we were joking around saying, I wish that they didn't go first. Now we're all very critical of how we're speaking, but it did make me realize how, and you'll run into this also, it really depends on your target audience. Who you're presenting to is how you present. So I think about when I am with kids, it's like, all right. I would be more like I was when I was leading the activity earlier. If I'm at a board meeting or something like that, I'm going to speak very differently. So you might hear that even in my presentation right now. But like Amy said, I am promoting physical activity. And I'll give you a little bit of history with our center. We started out with a First 5 grant, which meant we were working with children ages 0 to 5. And we were doing almost all nutrition education with some physical activity. Because you'll hear us talk about our funding sometimes. Network funding is a little bit restrictive on how much physical activity we can lead. So, over the years, what we're trying to do is elevate physical activity so that it truly is the other side of the equation when we're talking about our obesity epidemic and our health of our society. And so I asked you, and I used to be able to do this, but this group is getting younger, how you spent the majority of your free time when you were growing up. So take a couple minutes and think of what some of your fondest memories are when you were not in school. And who wants to share how you spent the majority of your time? Go ahead.
Playing on my street, like on the soccer pit with my neighbors, and we would do all kinds of little games.
Yeah.
Back before everybody was obsessed with Game Boys.
Yep. What else?
We would ride bikes and climb trees.
And did you actually knock on your friends' doors?
Yeah.
Wow. And now I can say I've come full circle because I have my own children. I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we moved specifically to have a better neighborhood for them to be able to play. And it's just interesting to see the challenges that come up in schools when you're scheduling play dates and whatnot. But I do remember very fondly that my parents were not a part of me scheduling my play dates. I would go around the block and I would knock on the doors and we would throw together some pretty awesome play sessions. And so now my dream is that I need to teach those games to my kids so that they are out on the cul-de-sac. Playing with their big wheels and whatnot. So I ask you then also, what do you think has changed? Why are we as a society so much less physically active? And that means children and adults. What do you think has changed?
Technology. I mean, everyone on the phone or video game, a Wii, something like that they're on the side. I mean, I feel like children nowadays are less imaginative than when we were younger.
And you bring up a good point also, because a lot of times when I'm promoting physical activity to parents, or let's say I'm promoting physical activity to teachers, my message is going to be very different. Because I'm not going to come in and tell a parent, your kids are so lazy, they don't do anything. You kind of put yourself inside of their mind and what is going on? Why are children less active? And like you said, technology's taken over. How many of you feel like safety, neighborhood safety, is a huge factor? Now, I can tell you actually that crime has not increased over the last few decades, but the media is extremely fear-driven. And we also, I think what has happened is as a neighborhood and as a society, we've shifted. So almost all households a lot of times have both parents out of the house during the day, whereas when I was growing up, there was always one parent that we knew was home, and I think my parents felt more confident letting us go out and play. But crime actually has not increased over the last 2 decades. But as a society, we're much more fear-driven. And that also plays a role when you get into schools and you start looking at who here works on a school campus and can tell me recess rules that you think are silly that go against physical activity. Go ahead.
Children walking on the hardtop.
Yeah, no running on blacktop, right? I've heard them say, we can't have, no, we're not allowed to play tag anymore because kids get hurt. And, you know, it takes a lot you got to recognize from a school's perspective, yeah, there's lawsuits and they're getting sued and whatnot, but really, kids can't run on blacktop? Come on. If they can't run on blacktop, where can they run? So you start to kind of see, when you start paying attention and looking at these trends that have happened that are very fear-driven, you're going to find that it happens at the parental level, it happens in schools, it happens in preschools, it happens in work site, and really what we're trying to do is kind of change that mentality to where we're bringing back movement and bringing back what, instead of physical activity, I like to call it active play. And really as an adult, if you're going to be physically active, it's probably something that you're doing as recreation, not so much as I have to go to the gym to go work out because my cholesterol's high. I mean, that's probably not why I'm going to go to the gym, even though maybe I should. But I'm going to do it because of the recreational aspect and the social aspect. So one thing that I do want to bring up, because it hasn't come up today, is our public health approaches when we're dealing with nutrition and physical activity. And of course I focus more specifically on physical activity, but we use what's called the socio-ecological model. Have any of you heard of that? Okay, good. So the way that it breaks it down is that we look at how we're promoting a message, and it breaks it from the individual level. So if I'm doing one-to-one education with a parent or with teachers, that we're dealing with it at the individual level. But then we go into another layer, and that's the interpersonal layer, and that's really our kind of community networks and whatnot. And then we go into schools and looking at environment, and then community, and then ultimately what we see make the biggest change is policy changes within organizations. How many of you have heard of school wellness policies? Yes, and from what I hear from most people is no. And so for me, and one of the things that we noticed is that these schools and these districts have these wellness policies that are stellar. They say, yes, we meet all of the physical education standards, every child gets 200 minutes every 10 days, so they pull the language that it should say, but then when you start asking the superintendents and the teachers, they go, who teaches it? I don't know. In Oroville City Elementary and Palermo school districts, they do not have a PE teacher. Period. So, if PE is going to be taught, it's going to be taught by the teachers. And if I ask the teachers who's teaching PE and they say, I don't know, there's something wrong. So, I'm giving you this picture so that you can see, here's policy at this level, and it may on paper look great, but our role is to come in then and lift up the teachers and our communities and give them the why behind it. And not only that, the support that they need, because obviously if they don't have any training and they don't have curriculum and they don't have equipment, they're not going to teach PE. So one of the things that we did in the last 2 years is now we have a new grant. It's called a PEP grant. It's a Carol M. White Physical Education Program. It is a U.S. Department of Ed grant, and we just bought $10,000 worth of PE equipment for each school. So when we start looking at campuses and their environments, what we see is also teachers may have a whole closet full of PE equipment, but not even have a key to get to it or know how to get it, know what's available. Those are some of the little issues that we tend to think are kind of minuscule, but unlock the door to the PE shed, and just that one simple change can really equal a lot of behavior change. Does that make sense? Okay, so one thing that you'll have an opportunity to do is we host these SPARK trainings. It's called Sports, Play, and Active Recreation for Kids. We host these, we'll probably be doing 1 each semester to 2 each semester, and we'll make sure that we throw an invitation out to all of you that you'd be able to go. Casey went, What did you think?
It was great. You gave a lot of tips. If you're going to be working with kids in schools, they share a lot of tips. Like you taught me, and they have instant activities that if you're kind of in a bind for time and get something going.
And breaking there, and I'll probably later in the semester do a whole workshop just specifically on physical activity because I cannot address everything. But one of the main focuses that we take the emphasis off of competition, and so I'll show you in a few minutes how you can make an activity still competitive, but not elevating those superstar athletes to be comparable to somebody that maybe hasn't had as much opportunity to sports. One of the other grants that we have is called COP. It's funding from the California Obesity Prevention Program. And so instead of doing that direct instruction with children and working with teachers, we're actually working on policy and environmental change. And one of the things that we've been doing this year is painting playgrounds. So stenciling playgrounds and crossing over so that what preschoolers are learning in the classroom, they're learning colors, and I mean it sounds so basic, but this is what's in their standards, is color recognition, counting, alphabet sequencing. So we've tried to integrate painting into the playground so that it's easier for teachers to just initiate really quick activities. How many minutes of physical activity are we promoting to children every day? Who can tell me? 60. If that's a one message that you walk away with today, then that's fabulous. And I will send out some other resources so you can see what the physical activity recommendations are for adults and whatnot. But really, when you're talking with, when you have such a small period of time when you're working with families or children, the one message that I say is more is better than nothing. Doing a little more than what you're doing today is better than nothing. And really being empathetic with families and recognizing what their challenges are. So if you're working at the individual level, let's say you're at OPT. Who here, is there anybody here that works at OPT? Okay, so let's say you're at OPT and you're promoting physical activity and you're telling parents that kids need to be active 60 minutes every day. What are some challenges that a parent might be facing to make that happen for their children?
2 full-time working parents.
Exactly. 2 full-time working parents. So sometimes it's a single parent working 2 jobs. And so the reason I say that is a lot of times in school we're taught that behavior is a choice and it's an individual choice. And if you're not choosing to do what are the best gold standards, then something must be wrong with you. Because that's what we're going to school to learn, right? So, if I come in and I'm telling somebody, your kid's what? Your kid's overweight, they're not active 60 minutes a day, they're eating crap, and then you realize and you start diving in deeper why this is happening, it's the same thing like Jenny Sharkey was saying, that there's a lot more challenges in somebody's life than what's top on our priority list may not be top on theirs. Sometimes we're working with clients that are going through substance abuse classes. Well, you know what? It probably isn't top on their priority list, and so you have to be sensitive in like how you learn to work with different clients. Does that make sense? Being empathetic. Same thing happens when you're working with schools and you're working with principals. You don't want to come in and wagging a finger and saying, this is what you should be doing. You come in saying, how can we support you so that, because your wellness policy, it does look stellar. How can we help you make that happen? And recognizing that teachers are challenged with their minutes in a day and whatnot. And on that note, now I'm going to practice what I preach. In the preschool world, we say children shouldn't be sedentary for more than 15 minutes. If you were standing up here right now, I'm going to show you what you would see. Oh my God, school's starting in a week. This is what my whole day is going to be like soon. I'm seeing like fogging over. So, if there's one thing I can tell you today is you're going to get nervous when you go out in the field and you might overplan your lesson plans, and then you're going to have an audience that kind of looks like I'm starting to fade. So you need to learn how to be able to go with it. You go, all right, we're switching things up, and I want everybody to get up, and for real. You can pretend